Burundi's newly elected president, Evariste Ndayishimiye, has been sworn in 2 months earlier than planned following the sudden death of his predecessor, Pierre Nkurunziza. No foreign heads of state were present when he took the oath of office in the country's new capital. Ndayishimiye pledged to defend the nation's interests and unify its citizens. Thousands of Burundians have come out to attend the swearing-in ceremony at the Stade Ingoma in Gitega, Burundi's new capital. Evariste Ndayishimiye, a former rebel leader, won May's presidential elections with 69% of the total votes cast. Nkurunziza handpicked Ndayishimiye to be his party's flag bearer. Last week, the Constitutional Court ruled that Ndayishimiye should be sworn in as soon as possible following Nkurunziza's death. He's expected to serve a 7-year term. His immediate challenge will be to hold the country together and help slow down the spread of COVID-19. African Affairs analyst and Channel Africa producer Nixon Katembo has kept a close watch on events in Burundi, and he joins us now via Skype. Nixon, a very good evening to you. Thanks for joining us. Welcome to the Globe.
Good evening to you, Simpiwe, and good evening to the viewers.
Well, the people have spoken and Ndayishimiye has now been sworn in. Is this the hope and future that Burundi has been yearning for?
I think we have to look at where Burundi has come from the historical perspective to where Burundi is now, to the extent of holding peaceful elections in their own term, funded by the Burundian government and the Burundian people themselves. And this leads to me to say that perhaps this is the future of Burundi going forward, having gone through a turmoil. If you look at the history of Burundi from 1962, when it first got independence, the dominance there has been of the minority over the majority. And here I speak about the ethnic composition in that country between the Hutu and the Tutsis. And you'd see that from 1962, there have been an attempt of the majority who are Hutus, they're trying to take over power from the minority who are Tutsis. And this actually stemmed from the colonialism that happened in that country. And you would recall that during the speech of the newly inaugurated president, Evariste Ndayishimiye, he mentioned about the history of that country and much of the problems emanating from colonialism, and asking for outside interference to be a thing of the past. So one would think that perhaps Burundi now is writing a new chapter and having gone through this turmoil and a painful history of division. Let's wait and see if this is a new sunset for that country.
Well, Nixon, Burundi is split between the Hutu majority and the Tutsi minority. Is there any appetite on the two communities to perhaps forge a unified and prosperous future?
Well, one would think that there is that appetite of forging a prosperous future. If you look at the history I've just touched on briefly, you would see that there have been animosity, especially among the ruling elite. And the ruling elite always use that ethnic card actually to have their political power and political base, accentuated in such a way that everyone tried to pull those ethnic cards on their own side. But if you go from the 1993 transition, when Melchior Ndadaye was first elected as a democratically elected president, and subsequent to his assassination in 1993, you'd see that the one who was the agriculture minister at the time, Sylvestre Ntaramira, was chosen to lead the nations and eventually died in 1994 with the then president of Rwanda, Juvenal Habyarimana. And subsequently to that, you'd see that the president of the National Assembly, who was Sylvestre Ndiwandunganya at the time, took over power after the death of Sylvestre Ndaramira. And in 1996, again, there was a coup d'etat, which, this time led by the former president Pierre Buyoyo, who has been defeated by Melchior Ndadaye in the 1993 elections. And this is when actually rebel groups sprang up. You look at the likes of Frodebu, FNL, led by Hussein Rajab, and the likes of Agathon Rwasa. These shows the history of Burundi from the ethnic division that have happened. However, I think the turning point still go back to the Arusha Peace Agreement, which was signed on the 28th of August in 2000 under the stewardship of Nelson Mandela, having taken the baton of negotiations from former president of Tanzania, Julius Kambarage Nyerere, who had earlier passed on in 1999. So you look at the makeup of the composition, of the ethnic composition in that country, and looking at the long history and having transitioned from that to the late President Pierre Nkurunziza, who tried to foster unity among Burundian people and trying to foster and create a decision of the state, which has culminated to the elections of Evariste Ndayishimiye as a current president. One would think that at least now they will actually leave that history of division between Hutus and the Tutsis and try to foster unity among the Burundian people, and above all, building democratic institutions that will actually see a prosperous country that much of the Burundian people yearn for.
You spoke at great length, Nixon, about unity and the former president, or the late president, Pierre Nkurunziza's efforts of fostering unity in that country, and also the ethnic composition in Burundi. Now, Tutsis are ostensibly only targeted by the repression of the Burundian authorities when their members are suspected to form part of the great coalition, as it were, that includes civil society movement, that includes journalists, that includes human rights defenders. So what is that particular focus of the sanctions that are imposed on the Tutsis, and will the election and the inauguration of the new president have any effect on the continuation of the peace efforts that have been necessitated by Mr. Nkurunziza?
Okay, let's separate two facts here. You talk about the issues of human rights and the role of Tutsis in the makeup of the state. You have to look at what the peace agreement says and the constitution of Burundi says. It says that representations of the state institutions will be 40% to the Tutsi minority, by the way, who form 16% of the entire population of Burundi, versus 60% of the Hutu majority, who forms 84% together with the Twa, which is another ethnic minority in that country. So you have those imbalances. But not only that, if you look at the history of Burundi, that has been of monarchy led by Tutsis. And this has been a protracted quest for maintaining that ruling elite, especially among the Tutsi minorities. Hence, you see that the 2015 coup attempt against Pierre Nkurunziza's government was led mostly by Tutsis. And in a quest for suppressing that rebellion, that's when you see the issues of human rights arising, and those who write about Burundi saying that there are human rights issue violations. But if you look at closer look at the political events behind those repressions, one would say that they are their own making in their own political circumstances. And if you find people rebelling against their government, they're trying to topple that government through the force of arms, and after that, running to a neighboring country which is more friendlier in terms of ethnic makeup of that friendly country next door. And here I mean Rwanda. These are the key issues that Burundi is going to grapple with. And you would understand that prior to the elections of Evariste Ndayishimiye, leading up to his inauguration, even the subsequent death of Pierre Nkurunziza, there has been an attempt to destabilize the Burundian government from neighboring Rwanda. You recall that about 3 weeks ago, if not a month ago, there were skirmishes between the Rwandan army and the Burundian army, where the Burundian soldier lost his life on Lake Rueru. And not only that, there were also rebel insurrections that are coming from Nyungwe forest just across the Rwandan border. So one have to look all those issues in two contexts in talking about human rights violations in Burundi and the suppression of Tutsi minority, who to me seems not to be acquainting themselves to the current political transition that is happening in Burundi, because it is to me a fair representation if and only that 60% majority that is allocated to the majority of 80% of the population, then 40% representation that is allocated to the minority, which forms the 16% of the population of Burundi.
Now, Nixon, in the quest for Burundi taking stock of that country's painful and violent past and then forging a way forward to a much more peaceful trajectory after the election of Mr. Ndayishimiye, well, he has been called upon to rein in the country's Imbonerakure, which is a youth wing of the ruling party. Well, given the links between the youth wing and, of course, the regime, is it likely to accede to that kind of pressure?
Well, Evariste Ndayishimiye come from a moderate aspects of the political divide in Burundi. You have those who extremists, I would say, within the ruling party, who see no need for negotiation and allowing, a supermajority trying to hold power, given its history in the country. But I would think that he will use his moderate approach to issues and that kind of cooperation that he has shown during the Arusha negotiations, because you would recall that every other delegations that was sent to the negotiation in Arusha, it's Evariste Ndayishimiye who was part of that delegation, mostly leading that delegation. And that's why you see the likes of former President Jakaya Mrisho Kikwete of Tanzania, who hosted under his presidency that particular negotiations between the belligerents in Burundi, was present at his inauguration today. So that gives you a picture of the regional aspect, but not only that, the political aspect within the ruling CNDD and those who are actually he has to contend within the country, and that gives you that there is a road ahead that he has to pave in trying to satisfy both parties within the ruling party and forming a stable country going forward.